What if I told you there's a place so cold, so cruel, and so relentless, it's considered one of the harshest punishments in human history? This isn't just a prison. It's a frozen nightmare. A place where frostbite becomes a friend, and survival is the only goal. Welcome to Russia's ice prison, a grim corner of Siberia where time and hope seem to freeze solid. Imagine being sent to a prison where the temperature drops to minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit. That's colder than the surface of Mars on some days. The Siberian wilderness, isolated, merciless, and unrelenting, became home to one of the world's most infamous systems of punishment, the Siberian gulags. These weren't just prisons. They were death sentences wrapped in layers of ice. But why Siberia? Why build prisons in a place where even breathing can hurt? It's simple. The vast, icy expanse acted as a natural cage. Escape wasn't just improbable, it was nearly impossible. Even if you somehow slipped past the guards, the unforgiving wilderness would likely kill you within days. Russia's ice prisons became notorious during the Soviet era, particularly under Joseph Stalin's reign. The word gulag stands for Glavno Upravlenie Lagerai, or Main Camp Administration. Sounds clinical, doesn't it? But behind that sterile name lay unimaginable horrors. Stalin used these camps to crush dissent, punish political enemies, and fuel the Soviet economy with forced labor. Prisoners, men, women, and sometimes even children, were sent to these icy hells for the smallest infractions. Whispering a joke about Stalin, gulag. Owning a foreign book, gulag. Simply being accused by a jealous neighbor? You guessed it, gulag. One particularly chilling fact? Some prisoners were sent there for crimes they didn't even commit. Imagine freezing to death for something as trivial as being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Life in the ice prison wasn't life at all. It was survival in its most brutal form. Prisoners were crammed into wooden barracks with little insulation. Blankets? Rare. Heating? Forget about it. The walls were so thin that wind and snow often crept inside, turning cells into freezers. And the food? A watery soup made from rotting fish heads and a chunk of black bread. That was it. Prisoners were expected to survive on this diet while performing backbreaking labor for up to 16 hours a day. Some were forced to mine coal or cut timber in temperatures so cold that the metal tools froze to their hands. One survivor recalled how frostbite was so common that prisoners' fingers and toes would literally fall off. Imagine watching your own body disintegrate while still trying to swing an axe. The ice prison wasn't just physically torturous, it was psychologically twisted. Guards employed bizarre punishments to break prisoners' spirits. For example, some prisoners were forced to stand outside in the snow without coats for hours. Others were confined to punishment cells, where the temperature was deliberately kept below freezing. Here's a bizarre fact. In one camp, prisoners were forced to march in circles for hours as exercise. The snow would compact under their feet, forming a circular trench, which eventually became a symbol of hopelessness. This was known as the Circle of Death. And yet, despite these horrors, some prisoners found ways to resist. They communicated through secret codes, shared scraps of stolen food, and even staged revolts. But such defiance often came at a steep price. Execution, or worse, more years added to their sentence. Did you know some of Russia's greatest minds and revolutionaries were imprisoned in these icy wastelands? Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the Nobel Prize-winning author, survived the gulags and later exposed their horrors in his book The Gulag Archipelago. His writings shocked the world and revealed the true extent of Stalin's brutality. And then there was Fyodor Dostoevsky, the legendary author of Crime and Punishment. He spent 4 years in a Siberian penal colony, an experience that deeply influenced his writing. Dostoevsky's time in the ice prison was less about physical survival and more about psychological endurance. He once wrote, "The degree of civilization in a society can be judged by entering its prisons." Escaping from Russia's ice prison was almost unheard of. The sheer distance between the camps and civilization made it nearly impossible. But that didn't stop some prisoners from trying. One of the most famous escape attempts was by Alexander Dolgin, an American citizen arrested in Moscow. He endured unimaginable torture and imprisonment before finally being released and sharing his harrowing story with the world. Another bizarre escape story involves a group of prisoners who allegedly trekked hundreds of miles through Siberia, only to end up in the same camp they had escaped from. Why? Because they got so disoriented in the endless snow that they walked in circles. Did you know prisoners in some camps had to wear numbers on their backs, not just to identify them, but to strip them of their identity? It's said that wolves would sometimes circle the camps, waiting for a chance to snatch a weak prisoner. Some guards were so cruel that they played games with prisoners, making them fight each other for scraps of food. And here's a truly bizarre theory. Some believe the harsh conditions of these camps were intentional experiments by the Soviet government to test human limits. Could they have been trying to create a new, perfect Soviet citizen by breaking people down and rebuilding them? It's a chilling thought. Today, many of these camps are abandoned, left to crumble in the icy wilderness. But their legacy lives on. The ice prison is a haunting reminder of what happens when power goes unchecked and humanity is discarded. There are even guided tours to some of these former gulags. Yes, you can now pay to experience a sliver of the horror. Tourists walk through the frozen ruins, feeling the eerie silence and imagining the screams that once echoed through the snow. Russia's ice prisons may feel like a relic of the past, but their lessons are painfully relevant. How far can a government go in the name of control? What happens when a society turns a blind eye to suffering? These questions aren't just about history. They're about us. Could you survive the ice prison? That's the real question. It's a place that tested the limits of human endurance, resilience, and morality. It's a place that, despite its horrors, reminds us of the strength and fragility of the human spirit. So the next time you complain about the cold, remember, somewhere in Siberia, people fought for their lives in temperatures colder than your freezer. The tale of Russia's ice prison is not just a historical footnote. It's a chilling testament to the extremes of human suffering and resilience. These camps weren't merely places of punishment. They were factories of despair designed to strip individuals of their humanity. Yet, in the face of such unrelenting cruelty, stories of defiance and survival emerged. These stories remind us that even in the darkest corners of existence, the human spirit can endure. But what does it mean for us today? It's easy to dismiss these horrors as relics of a brutal regime, but the lessons they offer are timeless. They warn us about the dangers of unchecked power, the fragility of human rights, and the ease with which a society can become complicit in suffering. Are we so different from the people who turned a blind eye to the horrors of the gulags? Or do we too have the capacity to ignore suffering when it feels distant and disconnected from our lives? And then there's the question of survival. What does it take to endure in a place like the ice prison? For some, it was sheer willpower. For others, small acts of kindness or rebellion. But for many, it was simply luck. This stark reality makes us question the narratives we tell ourselves about resilience and justice. Are we truly the masters of our fates? Or are we at the mercy of forces beyond our control? Perhaps the most haunting aspect of the ice prison is its silence. The barracks may be empty now, the tools rusting, and the snow covering the scars of human suffering. But the echoes of what happened there linger. They speak of a time when humanity was pushed to its limits, and in many cases, failed to rise above its basest instincts. So, the next time you hear the wind howling on a cold winter night, think of the ice prison. Think of the men, women, and children who faced that same wind with nothing but rags for warmth and the faint hope of survival. Think of what it means to be human in the face of inhumanity. And most importantly, ask yourself, what would you have done if you were there? Would you have survived? Or would you have become another whisper in the snow? If you found this chilling story intriguing, don't forget to subscribe to Mystery Junky for more dark and fascinating tales from history. Because the truth is often stranger, scarier, and colder than fiction. Stay curious and stay warm.